biggest need. Every hour we spend together, then suddenly the chances are small, just like the lottery. It's been 72 weeks in this town. I still believe I'll see you again. No matter what, I got off the ground for something that matters to me. But what do you want? What's your biggest need? Every hour we spend together, then suddenly the chances are small, just like the lottery. I just hope we could stay together. We wait and see, but the chances are small, just like the lottery. I don't know what it means, but there's a smile upon your face, and I see something shimmering in your eyes. And they say if you want to glimpse the future, you need space. And you said you'll put down your morning guns. Would you follow me to wonders? Take my hand and walk beside me in a world of thunder. Fear is an imposter. When you look at me this way, I find it hard to not give in. So the days became weeks, it felt just like the night before. You were slowly fading in my mind. When you left, I was so complete.
Hello everyone and welcome to our very first Design Careers Talk. We're so happy to have you all here tonight, and for those watching on our Facebook live stream, welcome, and I hope you're comfortable and settled in. The run of tonight is pretty informal. We've got 5 of our alumni who have studied across our design courses who are going to speak a little bit about their journey here at Billy Blue and now what they're doing in the industry. They're going to be interviewed by some of our academics. So firstly, we have Bree and Dean who've studied our interior design programs, and they're going to be interviewed by Stephen. We then have, let me just check. So it's Taylor and, Imogen, who have studied graphics and communication. And then we have Millie, who has studied photography with us. So please feel free to ask questions. It will be 15 minutes interviewing by the program directors and then a 5-minute Q&A. So for those watching on the live stream, do feel free to send your questions through and we'll feed them back to the alumni. Just a bit of background around Billy Blue. We are part of Torrens University, Australia, and we're really grounded in design thinking principles. We have a very commercial focus. It really is about the practical application of learning and that connection to industry. And that comes through in the way that we design our assignments. Our students graduate with that professional portfolio at the end and the confidence to take that into the industry. So thank you once again and enjoy the evening. I'll now welcome Stephen, Bree and Dean onto the stage.
Good evening, everybody who's kindly joined us tonight, and to everybody watching at home. I'm Stephen Dwyer. I'm an interior design teacher and educator here at Billy Blue, and tonight I've got the very great pleasure of speaking to some graduates, some alumni who are out there making the world a better place, one room at a time. I had the great pleasure of teaching Bree myself, so it's a great personal satisfaction for me this evening to be able to introduce you to someone who's carving their own niche within the industry. And doing interesting things. So we're just going to ask a few questions of both of our graduates tonight and then throw it open to some questions from the audience and our online viewers. So let's get started. I might start with Bree and ask you, could you just give us a snapshot of the journey that you've been on since graduating, perhaps some of the highs and the lows or the challenges that you've encountered?
Yes, I'm a really good case study because I've done a lot of things since I graduated. I started with a couple of internships. From there I was then offered a job as a junior designer that I did for a year and a little bit, and then I was made redundant, which is obviously like last in is first out. So unfortunately, a few interior designers, the juniors, that can be a bit of a worry, but luckily it was not a personal decision, it was purely business. So then when they had regained their, finances, they actually hired me back, which was amazing. That was across the hospitality and commercial design. I then decided that actually I did want to be in residential, so I moved into the residential space where I actually got positioned as a senior stylist for one of the largest property styling groups in Sydney. And most recently, I've actually gotten a new job as head of interiors and product for a startup, which is very exciting. So I think I've done
You've done good.
a few things.
Yeah. And it's an interesting thing that you observe. You're always going to come up against economic downturns. We've all worked through different recessions, global financial crises. It's being able to react and sort of refocus after that. Did you find, you were able to draw on some of the things you learned in this environment to sort of, maybe rebrand or look in lateral directions?
Yeah, well, what I did immediately was I knew there was an opening that they could hire me back for, which was as a drafts person. So I'd learnt drafting here at Billy Blue, and I knew that I liked it because we'd done it quite extensively. So what I did then was I actually enrolled myself in a short course to basically very, very, very quickly upskill. So I did an intensive course for a week and then went home, practiced, put together, added that to my portfolio, and then basically said, hello, I did all the things that you said I needed to do to be hired back. Here's what I can do now. And that's when they hired me back.
Excellent. Very, very wise choice. When you first enrolled and thought interior design is going to be the career for me, did you have in mind a different type of design that you would be doing, or has it matched up with what your experience has been?
It's gone like this. Yeah. I originally thought, obviously I think originally a lot of people are inspired by residential interiors, so I think that's, on the pages of Pinterest and things like that when it all starts. Yeah. And then when I actually looked into it further, I thought, I don't want to work in residential design because there's, what I thought was there's not as much skill attached. You don't need to abide by as many codes and as many, it's not as technical as something like commercial. So that's when I pushed myself to get into commercial. And then while I was there, I was like, actually, I really miss the connection to people and creating their personal spaces. So I moved back. So I've contradicted myself many times in my career.
Which is our right to do as designers. Because it's interesting feedback. Many students, many graduates have said they might have had one thing in mind. They go on the journey and maybe it's actually hospitality or commercial or even healthcare or childcare that is what fulfills them, or they find a good use of their skills. The direction you're heading in now, do you find you mentioned upskilling, you mentioned learning new things. Do you feel that learning and furthering that education is something you've had to stay on top of, even as a fresh graduate?
Yes, definitely. I think as well, there's the opportunities that may arise that you feel not equipped for. And actually, you said to me once when I was going to get an internship at Vogue Living, and I came to you after class and I said, I need to put this package together to try to get this job. It's probably the most sought after interiors internship in the country. Like, how am I going to do it? I think I was in like my second semester. And you just said, just say yes and then race around and figure it out. So that's how that's my philosophy, is anything that comes my way, if I don't have the skill set, I say yes. And then it's like a mad dash behind the scenes trying to actually figure out how I'm going to execute.
You've got to be open to it, haven't you?
Yeah.
Excellent. Some very, very interesting words there. Sir, if I could engage you at this point here, speaking of that sort of thinking, you perhaps have again taken a path that has had a segue from different parts of the industry. Could you just give us a bit of background, what you graduated in, but then the journey that you've gone on, what sort of work you've been doing since graduating?
Of course. My career has, much like your career, has gone anywhere and everywhere. I actually studied the graphic design course and then, weirdly enough, landed a great and amazing job in architecture. And they kind of said, look, the job that we had for you at that time was working in, communications and, how do we, market ourselves and sell ourselves. And it ended up turning into start doing signage, weirdly enough, and branding spaces. And that then took me onto this journey of what can you do with a piece of brand or communication in a physical space. And it turned into a career's pathway, I guess, into interiors. So much like I love food, so anything food-based, I will gravitate towards it with open arms. Landed another job in a company that purely focused on hospitality sector. So it was the perfect marriage of my love of food, graphics as well, and then also working in interiors, and they just kind of formed this crazy harmony of where I land now.
Excellent. You mentioned harmony, which is one of the key elements and principles, which is something we focus on greatly at Billy. And of course, we're very big on design thinking, conceptual driven work, going that extra mile when it comes to the thinking and perhaps the theory behind what we eventually provide to the client. Did you find that sort of preparation allowed you to move into different directions?
100%. I think I like to think of what happens in one industry is not a silo. It kind of works across so many other industries. So what I learned from graphics is applicable in interiors. It's the same thinking. Colour, I think, is probably one of the biggest ones that I focus on, because what you may think is a brand colour actually dictates what other people do in a space. Like, I've been privileged to work with McDonald's, and yellow and red is their primary colour. So where you kind of think with providing a space for people to actually think, and a little bit evil with, buying all the cheeseburgers, but you actually used red as a cue to then go, I want a cheeseburger, and it's where you place these cues. So this thinking is applicable across so many industries, and I guess I personally find it creates great harmony when a brand and also an interior speaks together, because it just forms that holistic thinking. It forms a whole experience, really. And as design, we don't really design just beautiful things. We actually need to think about designing experiences.
My next question is for both of you, and it's sort of quite timely. Last year we had a lot of graduates emerging into the industry during the lockdown, during difficult economic times. Both of you have obviously experienced that, and those of us that have worked in the design industry for any length of time experienced those up and downs. Do you not agree that designers have pretty much got portable skills that you can recalibrate when would you agree with that sort of premise?
Yes, absolutely. I think, and that plays into the creativity that we develop as well. We can think about how to do things in different ways that someone analytical may not. So I think not even within just purely your design skills, but I think ways in terms of, how can I make myself more hireable? What can I do in terms of updating this portfolio when I've just been made redundant and I don't have the tools anymore? I think we're very adaptable and we're very fluid.
I I have to agree. I have to say COVID was probably my best thing ever, as weird as it may sound.
It is surprising how many designers, graduates will give you that feedback.
Yeah.
It was a really, really difficult time last year, but a lot of people had positive experiences, worked on projects they may not have anticipated.
I got made redundant during that whole situation of working in hospitality, and suddenly 90% of every venue was shut down and locked out. So after redundancy, you know, the great freak out of what I'm going to do, how I'm going to make any of this work, I started my own studio. And weirdly enough, when you're hungry for work and you're so hungry to apply thinking in different areas, you'll find that work comes to you and you'll find great success doing that as well.
Excellent. A question again for both of you, and I'm sure your experiences will be very different. Is there something you wish you'd known when you were graduating, when you were starting out, that you now know and you think that would have been valuable to know?
Many things. I think one of the biggest things for me is just to not take things personally. You, like, as creatives, we literally, is our blood, sweat and tears that go into something as simple as a design presentation. If that's met with not the cheering that you had anticipated, it actually can be extremely hurtful if you haven't built that, like, designer skin, you know. So I think I would just tell my student self, like, people aren't going to like your ideas all the time, and that's okay. If people like your ideas all the time, you're possibly too mainstream. So I think that's the thing for me.
Most people in the design industry will probably agree. When a client says, I don't like that, it's hard not to hear, I don't like you.
Yes, exactly.
Yep.
Especially
As a
when
designer.
you've spent night and day putting it together
It's
for
usually
them.
not something we put together in a hurry, it's something with, as you say, blood, sweat and tears. So I think once you get that, I like that designer skin, it's an armour against criticism. Once that's on, you're more trawling for feedback you can action and listening to what you can fix rather than just be aghast that they didn't get it.
Yes.
I think touching on what you said as well, for me, it's lucky enough to have worked with or studied here and worked with some really great lecturers who said, particularly in graphic design, you've got a 3-second shelf life. Don't take it personally. It's the best analogy is like a flyer with Oxfam. You know, they hand it out, you look at it, you've got 2 seconds, you've got 3 seconds, you make an impression. And for me, it was seek feedback, not criticism. And much like you can't take it personally because you're not going to cater for everyone and not everyone's going to like it, but you can try your hardest to produce something that's going to be meaningful to you and also be meaningful to someone else. So you learn to adapt and you learn not to take things personally, but you'll end up producing something great regardless of what you do.
And you also learn to sell. I feel like half the job of a designer is a sales pitch.
Absolutely. You have to not just sell your idea, but you have to sell the client's idea at the same time.
Yeah. So selling that, did you feel that's something you've gotten better at?
Yes.
Yeah. Because it's one thing presenting your work to your lecturer, isn't it? And it's another thing convincing the client to sign a rather large check.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just like you show it to them, but then quickly you tell them why. You know, so if they don't quite understand, it's like, but this is why. And then they go, oh, wow, because they like that tidbit to take away to their friend or to tell their client or the person that comes into the restaurant, you know.
It's that age-old thing of how do I add value to this? And I think part of the whole pitch thing and selling is once your client grasps onto the idea, half the work is done. All you need to do is actually do the work now.
Excellent. And of course, these guys reveal something that's heartbreaking, but really important in what we do is that our design doesn't last forever. But that just means more work for us, doesn't it? I mean, if the interior lasted 100 years or that graphic or that identity or that space or that experience was eternal, we'd work once and never again. So we have to see it as an opportunity. I wonder whether now we might have any questions from the audience at all, or any online questions that may have come since we started. No pressure. Oh, a lady there. Thank you so much for ice breaking.
So you were saying that you moved from obviously graphic to interior. Did you upskill during that time, or did you just find it was all transferable?
A lot of thinking was transferable. Skills, absolutely. I was saying to the guys beforehand, and this is probably a lot of interior designers will hate me for saying this, but I actually did my first interiors project just using Illustrator. which is insane considering how much detail is involved. And very quickly learning off the bat, the tools that you use are going to be your best thing that you take with you. So I did quite a few short courses. I was fortunate enough to work with quite a few talented designers who said, you know what, if you teach us a bit of graphics, we'll teach you a bit of interiors as well. And I think I kind of like to live by the motto, always keep learning, always be a sponge. So definitely upskill. I think a lot of the thinking is the same. It's just thinking a little bit different in how you can apply that elsewhere.
Thank you for your question. That was very kind of you. Anybody else with a question or anything that might have popped up online?
I think
The landscape one? Yeah. So we did have a question earlier online, and the question was, if you have a degree or a diploma in interior design, can you be a landscape designer? Well, you may not be qualified to be a landscape designer. There might be some things you can and can't do, but I would agree that the thinking is often going to be the same between styling, interiors, architecture, landscape as well. So if you have a strong grip on the elements and principles, you have a feel for what it is you want to do, you know what it is you want to do with a landscape, often there is overlap. You will, as a residential designer, be asked to consult on external paving, on planting, on what colour to paint the letterbox or the guttering trim. And so there is a blurring between what we do when we work in architecture and in residential and landscape. But to call yourself a landscape designer or a landscape architect, or to work solely in that, you would have to upskill, and you obviously would have to learn a lot about the tools, the raw materials that are used in landscaping, which are quite different to interiors, styling and decoration. But I think a good barometer is if you have a passion for something, it's always going to be easier to do. So, if you're drawn to beautiful things, if you love nature, if you love the outdoors, that's, to my mind, that would be half the battle won. You could learn those programs, you could intern with someone, you could start with your own garden in the same way many people start with their own interiors or their own projects at home, and then take that out into the larger industry. But landscape, what landscape designers and landscape architects do is very different to what it was 50 years ago. In the same way, maybe styling for interiors wasn't a standalone industry, or installation art was only emerging. So it's a market and an industry that's constantly changing. So I would look at, if you were somebody who wanted to enter into the landscape environment as a job within the design industry, I'd look at who's doing the best work, who's winning awards, who's getting articles written about them, who's sharing their work on social media, and what inspires you, and then break that down as to how could I learn to do what that person has done and do it my own way. That would be my answer to that question.
Awesome. We do have another question that's come from online. Any tips on building your portfolio?
Oh, very, very good question. I will throw it over to both of you because you're building your portfolio right now.
Yeah, exactly.
I've got to say that's a feature of the interior design course that I think is very valuable. I'm not sure students always realise is valuable at the time. You're forced, against your will, to put together a portfolio of all of your work, and you've got to make that work look good. And what's interesting at that perspective, at the end of your studies, is that a lot of students look back at first trimester work and just go, oh my God, it's like looking back at your finger painting or something, or a dodgy piece of pottery you made when you were in kindergarten. But we're not talking about 12 years of education, we're usually talking about 12 months of education. So it's also really encouraging that you've progressed so much. But putting that portfolio together is crucial. Showing a variety of skills and experiences, I think, as well. Even your earlier work, you can crop and edit and recontextualize in a new way. And I think it's always important to have something that stands out. So maybe there's something that you are good at that you don't necessarily see as hugely commercially viable, like you're beautiful at sketching, or you take amazing photographs, or you recycle and upcycle furniture. When I'm looking at a lot of portfolios, I'm looking for something that stands out. So I think constantly updating your portfolio, filling it with work that tells the viewer about you, about your process, about the range of skills that you've got. But I think it's also very important to be able to talk about your work, to explain to a client or an employer what they're looking at. Because you've got a lot of graduates and a lot of potential employees who've got amazing portfolios, and sometimes you wonder, what was their involvement? Or can they talk about this? Could they sell this to a client? And I know, again, students don't necessarily like standing out the front of the class and having to talk about their work. No one enjoys that at the start. But the ability to do that is crucial, because if you're asking a client to take a leap, to invest in you as a designer and to spend usually quite a lot of money on the things that you've created, you've got to be able to convince them and to talk about your thinking. But you guys are right on top of this right now. Thoughts?
Yeah, this is like when design students or aspiring designers ask me a question, this is the most asked question. And I always say, when you're studying, take your assessments seriously. And what I mean by that is, don't do them at the last second. Don't think of them as an assessment. Think of them as the resume of your first job. Because once you collate, so for example, the portfolio that Stephen's referring to is one of the last subjects, and it's a subject all about actually putting together your professional portfolio and how to do that as an interior designer. So I found that I got to the end, and because I'd taken things quite seriously, it was as simple as figuring out the layout and the configurement of what I wanted that portfolio to look like. Some of my classmates who perhaps had jumped into interior design because they were good at art in high school or weren't taking it seriously at that stage, they found themselves having rushed all their assessments. They actually had to go back, fix the assessments, and then put it in a portfolio. So my biggest piece of advice would be just do those portfolios like that is the only thing you're going to use to try to get a job. And then when the time comes, you've actually got an incredibly impressive portfolio, because people looking at it know you're a student. They don't expect you to have built and designed a restaurant. They just want to see that you've done the work and you've done it properly. That's what I would say.
Absolutely.
I couldn't agree more. I think cheeky advantage being a graphic designer, you can make your portfolio look great with the work in other industries. Layout, very important. I like to do this exercise as well. I look back at my old work now as well and kind of look at it and cringe a little bit. No such thing as hindsight. The good thing is, take your work, even from first trimester, look at it again and treat yourself like you are the client. If I was the client, what would I want out of this? How would I revisit this? And always keep reworking, keep thinking differently. If I did this slightly different, would this have a better outcome? And don't be afraid to, I've done this many times, throw it all out again and start again. If your portfolio doesn't make you feel great, it's not going to make the client feel great. You have to be able to sell the dream and sell the dream that lives in your head, because 9 times out of 10, they will understand what that dream is.
And also actually just as a student, I think you're very aesthetically minded. Like if things look beautiful, you think that that's a success. But employers don't want to see just beautiful mood boards, because most people can put together a nice mood board. So the uglier stuff that I thought was uglier as a student, for example, like the technical drawings, are so ugly to look at to me as a student. I don't want to put that in my portfolio, but that's actually that's actually what they need to see.
A good drawing set though does make every other interior designer actually feel really happy, because if things are so accurate and so beautifully presented, like you can treat the most boring and mundane documentation set as an actual portfolio for that particular project.
Because there's a lot of feedback that we get when we show students older work. Here's Harry Seidler's drawings, here's Jörn Utzen's drawings, and they say, oh my God, they're so beautiful. And it's like, well, I think that's a really good point. If you treated your own work like that as future documents for posterity that are going to be looked at with the same sort of scrutiny, you'll always be prepared. I think in our course as well, forcing you to do it, forcing you to confront your work, actually sets you up to do it regularly, because as an industry, we're awful at it, to be really honest. You say, come for an interview, damn it, my portfolio is not up to date. No one wants to sit down at the end of a long, hard week and go, right, this weekend I'm going to bash out my portfolio, which is the last thing you want to do as graduates, actually.
Yes.
But it forces you to take it seriously and hopefully sets you up for a system or a program of doing that for the rest of your career.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Stephen. That was awesome. I hope everyone at home got a lot of information. I know I'm feeling inspired to study again. We're now going to hear from Imogen and Taylor, who's going to be interviewed by Michael. So once again, thank you guys. That was awesome. And for those who are here, please go up to them after this. They're here to answer all your questions. Don't be scared.
Great, thank you. That was an awesome discussion, actually, and I think there are some really interesting points brought up there. Particularly, I think that this idea that design is a fairly fluid industry at the moment, and this idea of crossing disciplines, which was once quite unusual, is now actually quite mainstream. And often teams are made up of very different specialities. And I think that what was shown there as a really good example is a graphic design student who'd learned those skills and was able to translate them. So I think that was a really interesting aspect. So my name's Michael Donohue. I am the creative director of Billy Blue Creative, and here at Billy Blue Ultimo campus. And I'm here to talk to Imogen and to talk to Taylor. And so I'll just introduce each of them first. And so Imogen is a graduate of the Bachelor of Communication Design here at Billy Blue, an AGDA award winner, and currently designer at Smack Bang Designs, which I'm going to ask you a little bit about in a while. And so I know that during your time here, I think you've done an internship with Vogue Australia, won a prestigious AGDA award, so I'd like to know a little bit more about that, and has worked for renowned agencies such as Frost Collective and currently with Smack Bang Designs. And Taylor Cope-Wallace, also a graduate of the Bachelor of Communication Design from here at Billy Blue, is the Product and Projects Director at Lad Bible, the Lad Bible Group. And Taylor was a scholarship winner at Billy Blue, who worked on the world-class lineup of clients, including, wait for this, Justin Bieber, Vivid Sydney, ANZ, Hyundai, and many more, apparently. You can tell us all about the Justin Bieber experience in a minute. So I'd just like to welcome both of you here and thank you for coming here today, sharing your time, and more importantly, sharing your experiences with the Billy Blue crowd. So I'm going to start off by saying that we're all driven by very different passions and a diverse range of influences in our creative pursuits. So I want to take you back a little bit and ask you, what inspired you to become a designer? So I'll start with Imogen. What inspired you to become a designer?
Definitely not the typical way to become a designer, but actually started, getting interested in design by doing what I didn't want to do, which was studying law. That was the first thing I jumped into after high school. I, loved research. I loved learning. And it just kind of made sense to me, I'll just do something in law. And after a couple of years, I was like, I definitely could not be wearing a suit for the rest of my life. And I always, since I was little, I was always looking at like logos and other designs. And, I often still to this day will choose a wine bottle based off the label rather than anything else. And I think from that point, it was kind of like, I need to do something in design. So it was kind of a nice exploration though to kind of see what I didn't want to do to realize what I did want to do. And once I fell into design, it was just like, match made in heaven. It just, everything sort of seemed to flow. And, coming to Billy Blue really sort of helped me enhance that love and go straight into the industry and tackle it. It's been great.
So is it a general awareness of design that you always felt you had?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. It's interesting you should say that. First thing is that do you see parallels between the way you thought as a lawyer and the way you think as a designer?
Absolutely. You don't think that two those sort of subjects would ever sort of collide, but I actually really found the research aspect of that I did a lot when I was studying law was so correlated in terms of design. I think it's so important now to be re-engaged with, what's the latest trends and what's the innovation and what are people doing outside of your industry, because that's the stuff that really informs your design decisions and what's going to make an amazing brand down the track. And often I find if I'm about to start a new project, instead of just jumping straight into drawings, which we all want to do, we always want to design something that's really beautiful, but we need to step back and do some research, do some critical thinking about what does this brand look like in 5 years, 10 years, what are the competitors, what are they looking to do for the future. And I think having that backing of taking a step back, think about the research behind it has been key.
No, I think that's a really good point, and sometimes I talk to my students about, think like a lawyer, because in actual fact, I think the presentations before, the discussions before, brought up this idea of aesthetics, and aesthetics are, it's a styling process, but in actual fact, you have to be very analytical about design before you even get to that level of veneer. If I say veneer, that sounds derogatory, but that idea of styling is built on the foundations of something that's quite analytical and research-driven.
Absolutely. At the end of the day, we can all design something that's beautiful and that's nice to look at, but if it's not backed up by consumer insights and future trends and innovation, then that brand's just going to cease to be relevant, and it's not going to last the test of time. And you often find that brands that are sort of lasting out there are ones who just have the research backed into them, and that's what we need to do.
Great. My second question, based on your first answer, was: Have you gone with the quality of the wine versus the design of the wine labels?
Oh no, always the wine label. No, no. Definitely grown from that. But it's interesting you brought up wine, because one of the clients that I actually pitched to was Jacobs Creek, and that was kind of like this is a design bucket list, isn't it? Just come full circle, choosing something based off a label to actually designing a label. So I guess one of the actual best things about design I found is seeing your work in the real world is just absolute killer. I was just saying to the guys before, that the first time I saw someone wearing my design, I had to stop myself from being can I just take a picture? And that's actually but didn't actually, but
yeah, it's quite a buzz, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Great. Taylor, the same question to you. What inspired you to become a designer?
Yeah, I graduated a lot later than you, so it's kind of a trip back memory lane, but I remember kind of primary school, high school, spending a lot more time on the visual aspect of a essay rather than the essay itself, and I got a lot of support from my art teacher and things like that, and I ended up just kind of cruising into a role that I ended up enjoying a lot more because of that. Design was just a natural part of what I used to do, and it's funny that you think you want to be a certain type of person or a certain type of career. Design is something that you kind of attribute or attach yourself to at a young age. Hence, you end up studying a course like design. But I feel like for me personally, it was the precursor or the dip in the toes, of what could be a career, that's much largely attributed to the creative industry. So yeah.
Did you always feel like you knew what kind of designer you were going to be, or?
I always dreamt of I'm going to be this creative director, like yourself. I always kind of thought that's the pinnacle of what I need to be working towards. And I feel like that's kind of how you approach your early stages of a career. You kind of have this kind of goal that you kind of, see in articles and, see online and things like that. But I think particularly for me, my role has changed so fundamentally. And I think that it's really important to note that things are moving so quickly these days. The role that you thought you aspired for is, will be something completely different in 5, even 2 years' time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the possibilities just open up before you in lots of ways. So you go in at one level, and then I think it's then that the pathway often reveals itself.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I think that what's interesting about that is that we all start from these different positions, and and from my point of view, I was really into punk music, and so I was designing little fanzines and sticking them together and photocopying them and selling them, and then I realised, oh, this could be a job. You know, that I could be involved in this industry, and design back then was very different. And I know people who've come to the design industry through graffiti, for example. And so I think that what we can see here is that we all have these very different creative impulses, and they can all feed into the sort of educational system. And then from that, obviously, we can start to spread out and to start to, find our own way and develop, new paths.
Completely. Like, I think there's no one cookie cutter creative. My dad's an accountant, and my mum's coming from an interior design background. My girlfriend's an interior designer. There's no one answer to being a creative. I think you can apply creative thinking to any aspect of a career. And I think one of the things with communications design, is you learn a framework for that thinking, learn a discipline and, an attitude to bringing that. And I think the guys mentioned before, it doesn't necessarily mean that you should limit yourself to one specific discipline per se, like graphic design. These days a designer needs to work in motion graphics, mixed media, even like interiors and things like that. It's about that flexibility, and it's the framework in which you approach that is really important.
Great. I'm just going to move on to the idea of leaving college and leaving university, becoming a professional designer. And Imogen, I'm going to, given Billy Blue's reputation for embracing the unorthodox, then I came across the quote by Tess Robinson, which, who's the founder of Smack Bang Creative. This is the quote: "We're fearful of the norm and use our innate curiosity, open minds and daring spirits to keep mediocrity at bay." I thought that was really inspirational.
She's a good writer.
It's beautiful. So I guess what I'd like to know about is the culture that you now work in, the culture of Smack Bang Designs, and what you do there. What does your day look like? And
day to day, it changes every day, which I think is part of the exciting part about being a designer, is that. And especially as well, graphic designer, is if you're looking at interiors and that sort of stuff, which you could have a project for years, whereas graphic design, you could have a project for 2 weeks. And it's always changing and it's always evolving. And so one day I might be working on creating a website, or the other day I might be running a photo shoot, or I might be checking print proofs for a packaging that I've just designed. So it varies day to day, which is always exciting, because there's nothing worse than when you're working on a project, especially one if you don't like for ages and ages, and you're just thinking, God, I just want to do something else. But it's good I think what's been really great about working with someone with Smack Bang, who are very varied in sort of their disciplines. So they do everything from branding, packaging, website, the whole lot. And so I've really got to expand my skills in every skill set. I didn't become a specialist in any way, but I get to work on websites and stuff. And recently I've taught myself to do motion as well, so I'm doing a lot more of animation as well and stuff like that. And I think having those extra skill sets that you're not really spread thinly. I feel like you're like a master of all of them, and I find that's really helpful. And it applies to almost every project that I get to, and especially motion, as you mentioned, like that's something that's come up recently, is so important in terms of getting people engaged on social media and stuff like that. And I had to teach myself how to do motion. It was actually one of my old colleagues who was a motion designer, and after work I just sort of said, "Oh, can you teach me a couple of things over a beer?" And after a while I ended up learning my skills, and now it's like one of the best qualities that I have. And whenever I present something to a client, I've animated their logo, they're just blown away, and it sells it straight away. But yeah, like day to day always changes, and whether it's something conceptual where I'm just sitting down like drawing and just like having a trawl through some fonts that I really love, or maybe it's something that's really practical and I'm standing up and doing a photo shoot. It changes, and I think that's great.
I think you mentioned the idea of curiosity there, which I think is the one the one character that I always look for in a designer. We can teach skills, but actually this idea of curiosity, always seeking something new, I think is intrinsic to all great designers. So just a little bit more then about the culture, because I think one of the things that's interesting is that you move from design studio to design studio, and each place has its own individual culture. And I looked at Smack Bang, and it did seem to have an identifiable creative culture. Could you explain? Could you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, I think what I've sort of learned being in a couple of different agencies and stuff is that it's so important to find a culture that you resonate with, and that you're with people that you admire and you're passionate to work with, and you're going for a common goal. I think it's been a really great aspect, and so the sort of culture that I have there is awesome. Everyone is very collaborative, very open, and I've worked in agencies and with designers before who are very secretive and working their silos, and what I found with these guys is that we're very much like, let's just throw it out there. What do we think of this? Let's get some ideas, let's get some feedback, and it's all about that collaboration, which I found really inspiring and really helped to elevate all of our work together. So that's been an awesome aspect of working in the team.
That's lovely. That's a really good insight into. I think that you do have to, as a young designer entering the industry, it is about finding where you fit in, and that's not only about the work that you do, but it is definitely about the people that you work with. The idea of a collaboration, and the idea of having a good cultural fit for yourself. So I'm glad you found that. Okay, and Taylor, again, a similar question. I'm just going to again just read a little quote here. I'm just going to frame, actually, for those of you who are not familiar with Lad Bible, I'm just going to frame it with just quite how influential Lad Bible is. Lad Bible were winners of the Cannes Lion Festival for Creativity, taking home 8 awards, including 2 Grand Prix accolades for their Trash Isles environmental campaign. Since its launch in 2012, Lad Bible has posted nearly 7,000 videos, which have attracted over 5 billion views on Facebook. Yep.
Yeah. Yep. Surprises me, I guess. Yeah.
So my question to us, can you tell us a little bit about what life's like at Lad Bible? I'm particularly interested in its philosophy and your role as the product and projects director.
Yeah.
Which is a mouthful of a title.
Yeah, no, it's like, to be honest, it's a mouthful for me. We call it P&P, and nobody knows what that means, so probably you've nailed it. I've been there since its inception in Australia.
Right.
So they launched commercial operations in Australia in 2019. There were 3 of us that started, and now we're 30 people, and that's 2 years of massive growth, millions and millions of dollars of revenue generated. We're launching an office in Auckland, in Melbourne, and soon to be Singapore. So huge growth, really exciting times. And I think that's part of a driver for me. You're working. I think you mentioned before, working in a smaller team. You're not just about a designer in front of a Mac. You're solving problems with a finance person, or you're kind of approaching a marketing PR release or something like that. I think there's much more to being creative than just the tools that you get taught in university. So in terms of the culture, what Lad Bible's like, I think the founder, Solly and Aryan, founders, just had a kid. He's not even 30 yet, and these guys have come out of university and created what is nearly one of the biggest social media brands in the world. And I think it's really, really inspirational to see how they've taken a company as small as 5 people in Manchester and grown it to be nearly 500 people in Manchester, London, Ireland, Sydney, and now a couple of different APAC regions. So there's this huge sense of kind of growth and excitement and mutual kind of advancement. And that's really exciting for me. I think the ability to be involved, the experience, it's been something that I've kind of treasured as one of my, most, highlighted experiences of my career. I think you and I are relatively new into it. So
Definitely.
yeah, no, loving it.
Right. You know, all the best things start in Manchester.
Yeah.
I just said that I'm from Manchester.
Yeah.
Great. So I think that idea of a small team being able to achieve so much, global dominance in some ways is really interesting because, and I think that's about. It's about that youthful approach, I think, in lots of ways, that sort of freshness and being able to see new opportunities. So I think that's awesome.
Yeah, completely.
Great. And is there a philosophy that drives Lad Bible, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. We've started to spend a lot more time on that because I think it's really important. Previously, we've been kind of like reactively growing with this kind of volatile, social space, which, in a lot of times we don't really have a lot of control over. So we've started to kind of build out more of a mission statement. And I think that off the top of my head, it's, building communities of, the world's youth that laugh, think, and act. And I think that's really true to what we try to do. There's not only the viral nature of the videos that we push out, but there's also campaigns like you mentioned, Trash Isles. We're about to launch one on Amazon Prime Video called Unheard, which is a big streaming on-demand provider that will be running a 6-part series about racial minorities in Australia. There's an audience that we have at scale that a lot of other traditional publishers don't have. I think there's a responsibility there to kind of move away from what is traditionally known as lad or lad culture. And the UK counterparts, my colleagues over there, have been kind of moving through that process. And, it's an interesting experience here in Australia as well to kind of tackle that branding.
And I think just to finish off on that point, I think one of the really interesting things here is that design can change people's perceptions. It's not too big a claim to say that we can change the world through design. At its best, it can be ephemeral and it can be whimsical. And you mentioned the idea of laughing. I think it can be humorous, but also actually it can shape the way shape our future.
No, it's so true. And design doesn't need to be aesthetically cutting edge. Design can be functional, anti-design almost. You can design with the sense of creating something more approachable to a certain audience, and it doesn't design is a language, multiple languages, so it's really about kind of learning how to harness that, understand when to apply that in certain circumstances.
Great. Did either of you what was your biggest surprise about entering the workforce?
Ooh, biggest surprise. If you've got an answer, I'm into.
I think I was shocked by how much I held myself at such a high value, and that I think some of the guys mentioned before, it's like when you do your portfolio, you're so invested in it. Everything is about you being this, unrealistic, value of yourself. And, the people in the industry just don't have time. They're not thinking like that.
Yeah.
Their job is to hire the best person that fits in with the culture, that fits in with the people that they have there at that particular time, the right skill set, the right level of experience. And there's all these elements that you just don't really realise. You just think, I've achieved so much, I've spent so much time on my portfolio, why isn't this being of value to them?
Yeah.
And you struggle with that.
I think that's an interesting point because I think the outside perception of a designer is that they are ego-driven.
Yeah.
And when you get into the industry, you find out, I've got to work with all these people, and actually there's no time for egos, and there's no place for that because, you were talking about collaboration before.
Yeah.
Actually, it's about what we can all achieve.
Yeah, and they touched on it before. It's don't take things personally. I think when I first started, it was very much if no one likes my design, then I'm an awful designer. But it's more than that. It's about, like you said, the language that people are speaking to, and it's so important that you're addressing the client and then rather the client's customer base that they're referring to. And I think what's been great about, for example, when I do collaboration, it might be something like everyone in the team's like, let's just scroll as many logo ideas as we can on a wall, and let's just go yep, nup, and that kind of is like a bit heartbreaking. Like that's my work, but it's all about like vetting those and getting the best outcome out of that. And so yeah, it's been a surprise for me to take a little bit more of it, like the design armor, as Brie was saying earlier, and just taking it on the chin and go, no, what's the best outcome for the client, for the business, and that commercial decision.
Yeah, and I think that what was also brought up before is this idea that you have to learn to sell an idea. You have to learn to take a client on a journey, so that in fact when you present your idea, they're already in there. They already know that. Oh, that's what I was thinking, and that's. I think that's it sounds horrible to say that you've got to sell an idea because it sounds sort of very salesman-like. But in actual fact, you've got to learn.
You do, and it's also like if you can't sell it to the client, how are they going to sell it to their customers? Yeah. So you've got to get them on board, get them excited, get them passionate, and then their customers will be like, oh, all about that, and everyone will want to get involved. So.
Awesome, great. I've got just a couple more questions, which. To both of you, what was the most valuable thing that you learnt at Billy Blue that you've taken with you throughout your career, do you think?
I have two parts. One of them is, I guess, the more practical side, and you just touched on it before, but the presentation skills. And, I understand it's not everyone's favourite activity to stand up in front of and do public speaking, but the fact that Billy Blue made you present every assessment and every idea, and you had to really stand up in front of your peers and say it, and even if you felt like you were saying something stupid, and, it's so important. And, it's what a great time to practice and do it here when there's people who will give you that constructive criticism, because there is so much presenting in design, and like you said, selling the idea and standing in front of the client and getting to sign the dotted line on terms of like a concept or an idea. So in terms of the practical skills, that was something that I really took from and was really grateful for. And then the other side of it as well is that, don't take design so seriously. I think you've got to have fun. Design is meant to be fun. It's meant to be engaging. And I think when I was here, I was really enjoyed just like doing fun things and trying out new ideas. And you still need to do that in the outside world. And when something sticks, it sticks.
Yep, that's good. Good point. Remember, make design fun.
Has to be.
Yeah, I mean, completely agree. Like, I think one of the biggest things I took away from Billy Blue is like design is a collaborative experience, and you're doing it with your peers, right? Like you're in there solving a problem together. It's not just you, like in an echo chamber, kind of trying to kind of figure out a problem. Like, I think you need to use the resources and the different personalities around you. So, I think Billy Blue really encouraged that kind of collaborative work, understanding different personalities and how they can bring different things to, a problem.
Great. Thanks for that. That was awesome. This is the first time I've met both of you, and I learned a few things as well, so that's really good. So I think what we'll do now is open it up to a couple of questions, if anyone has any questions for...
I've got one that's come from our live stream. So it's actually from one of our graduates, but they graduated from the Diploma of Marketing with Torrens University, and they've said, I felt the need to do something that's a bit more creative. Do you think that having the experience and knowledge in marketing will help in communication design?
Absolutely, yeah. I think there's so many factors in terms of what you need to know when you're doing the graphic design, but marketing more than ever is so important. Everyone's on social media, everyone needs a website, and if you had that background knowledge in marketing and you know how the consumer's thinking and behaving, that's just going to, add worlds of worth to your work in graphic design.
Yeah, completely agree. Like the amount of times that a marketing manager has come up and asked a design-related question, I think like that knowledge, that prior knowledge would be so useful.
Amazing, thank you. Another question, how did you get your first job after you finished uni?
So after I finished uni, and we had a fantastic, one of our last courses we did in my last semester was to put together your portfolio. And like you said, it was great to force you to do that because it's something that you just would continuously put yourself off. So I created my portfolio, and as soon as I graduated, I sent it out to a couple of agencies that I really wanted to work for, and just put it out there. I didn't wait for a job ad or anything like that. I was like, I really love your work, this is why, and I'd love to work for you. And then it was Frost Collective that called me up and just sort of said, come in for a chat. And then I was working with them in the next couple of weeks. So I always found that it never hurts to ask the question. I wouldn't want to wait for the right role to come up. You got to talk to people, you got to get in their ear, and
Did you play on the fact that your name was Frost?
I know. We were talking about it before. It's like
Vince Frost.
maybe that was no. He's lovely, but definitely not related.
Yeah, completely. Like, I think you just got to get stuck in. There's no harm in sending an email and then, or even calling, or, you know, we have people all the time kind of messaging us, and, you know, those people stand out. There's so many people that just send, emails off on job applications, and it's really hard to kind of weed through those people. So the people that do kind of chase something aggressively really do stand out. Same for me, like a couple of studios that I really wanted to work for. I was lucky enough to get an internship at a Sydney studio, so Eskimo Design. So I think like it's all about just being aggressive on it, doing what you can to take up the opportunities that you're given.
I think that's a really interesting point, actually, because I think both of you knew the sort of people you were wanting to work for. And I think that's really important because, you know, what kind of designer do you want to be? And I think I asked you that earlier on. But at the end of your course, then the way that you can tailor your portfolio, you know, you can target it to the people that you want to work for. And I think that the showing, it's not putting yourself out there going, I want a job. It's actually I want to work for you, and I want to work for you for these reasons because I admire what you do, and that will actually resonate with those employees.
Definitely not advocating you send out a million things. But, you know, have an intention in terms of who you're applying for, and just about selecting those portfolio pieces that you know that you think they will gravitate to, and also choosing things that that you're passionate about and that you can talk about, and again sell yourself in.
Yep.
And explore like other formats as well. Like, it doesn't need to be a PDF. It can be things like Squarespace. There's other tools out there to create your portfolio in a really dynamic, easy to send out way. Like, you know, the amount of times I've tried to open a 10 megabyte PDF off an email, like you kind of have to move on. So, you know, if it's really easy, think like if you mentioned before about, you know, you've got 3 seconds, like how does that create an impression? To the person that's receiving it.
I was old school. I sent mine by post.
Really? Well, that can work equally as well, I guess.
I think that's really interesting because we were talking about this in the studio recently with a student, with a graduate. In the direct mail is so not used these days that actually it's quite surprising.
You've got to stand out somehow.
Amazing, guys. Thank you so much. That was so informative.
Thank you.
We're now going to invite our final speaker up for tonight, Millie Mead, who is the founder of Millie Mead Photography, and she's going to be interviewed by Mark. So welcome, guys. Please come up.
Hello.
Hey, hi.
Hello.
Good to see you again.
You too.
Welcome everyone. My name is Mark Craddockville. I'm a lecturer here at Billy Blue Design College. I've been working here for 10 years and I've been working in the industry, in the photographic industry as a commercial advertising for photographer and also a domestic photographer for 15 years. So it's great to have one of my students back and to have a chat with her tonight about her time at Billy Blue and what she's been doing since she's left Billy Blue. So it's great to have you, Millie.
Thanks, Mark.
And what I'd like to sort of begin with is actually how you began your career in photography.
Yeah, so I straight out of high school, I went to uni, one of the big unis in Sydney, and I did a media comms degree. Like the other creatives have touched on, I knew I liked design and I was, drawn towards a creative industry, but I didn't really know what that looked like for me. And so I went and I enrolled in this media comms degree because I thought, I'll find my way, but I didn't. I was studying for 5 years and I finished that degree and was like, I don't actually know what I learnt and what I'm going to do. And I know a lot of my friends had the same experience doing the same course. And so I started working in PR, but I didn't love it. And I was photographing for, since I was 17 or something, since I got a camera during high school. And that was a hobby. And then someone asked me to photograph their birthday party or an engagement party or something, and so I got paid to take photos, which was really amazing. And so I started taking on a little bit more work. It was a pretty big deal for me at the time to start getting paid to take photos. And I kind of then really didn't like PR, stopped doing that, and was like, I'm going to be a photographer. And that was kind of when I found Billy Blue, because the next step was trying to do it by yourself. I don't know, I found it really hard and I didn't want to do it. So that's when I started to look, okay, if I want to make this my career and this be my whole life, I need some people around me, I need some technical skills, because I didn't have that. It was a hobby for me. I need some technical skills, I need a network, and that's why I started looking at uni again, and that's when I found Billy Blue.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's a lot of information online, there's a lot of tutorials, there's a lot of workshops that you could attend. Why would you want to attend a college and
100%.
attend face-to-face?
Yeah, it's a good question, because I did try and do a lot of, like, there's so many YouTube tutorials online, right? Like, you can kind of do those, and I did have people that I knew who were working in the industry who had kind of trained themselves from YouTube, and they're still working and they're successful. But I really like education and I like connection with people, and I guess that's why I decided to go and look for that again. And as soon as I came to Billy Blue, I came to an info night like this, and people, like lecturers, I met Guy and he remembered my name, and that was so different to my last course, and I could really see how tangible, there's a studio downstairs that I got to work in for most of my course, and for me just to have a hands-on experience was invaluable, and it gave me way more than anything online, and they are really valuable, and I still utilise them, and we did utilise them while we were studying. But yeah, to have the connection with people who are working in the industry and have the experience was really important.
I was wondering if you could give us an overview of some of the subjects that you covered during the course?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I said, I was kind of doing photography as a hobby and a passion. And I was like, oh, I'm a photographer. And once I got in first trimester, light and lighting, camera and capture, which you took my class for, I think. Really stripped back the fundamentals, and I was like, oh, I actually don't know a lot of this stuff, and it's so important to get under your belt, so that then you can start having creative ideas, which is what I really enjoyed, and telling stories. So it was the fundamentals that were really important for me in the first trimester, and really kind of knocked down my ego, like, oh, okay, I have stuff to learn. And then the second part of the course, I guess, was more about finding your voice. And then the third one, I guess we did folio, we did motion design, and so I still learnt new skills because I tried video for the first time, which I loved, and it's now a really big part of my business, is doing video and photo. And starting to represent myself as a photographer, as a videographer, so that I would have skills and a folio to take out into the world.
And career prep.
Oh my gosh. I'm sorry.
Subject that I do.
Sorry.
Which is all about business. So we do try and teach the students how to run a business and how to be a successful business person.
I'm not saying this, that was my second favourite class.
Okay.
It is really important. Yeah, because I went straight from uni to running my own business. And that class was so important. Sorry.
Excellent. Well, it's obviously paid off. So you're now a very successful photographer. So can you sort of give us a bit of an overview as to what happened when you finished the course, which I think was 2019. Mid-2019?
So when I finished the course, I rolled straight into, working for myself. So I work as a freelance photographer and videographer. So I went into the commercial genre. So while I was at uni, I did try like domestic photography. I tried a whole range of things, and what really stuck was commercial photography. So I rolled straight into that when I graduated. But the most valuable thing I guess I learned from my lecturers was to start picking up work while I was studying. So I was taking on jobs and I was saying yes to things with the encouragement of my lecturers, so that then when I graduated, it was a real flow for me to get into work, and I already had clients. And since then, so I work as a commercial photographer and videographer. I contract with an agency in Surrey Hills, so it's a lot of product, food, wine photography. I do a lot of video, which I really enjoy. portraits, etc.
So the photographic industry is very diverse. There's a lot of different sort of niches and genres that you could be involved in.
Yeah.
When you were first enrolled in the course, did you have a clear idea as to what you wanted to do and when you finished, or did you find that evolved over time?
No, I had no idea. I knew I wanted to be a photographer, and I guess that's why I'm so thankful that I did the course so I could work it out, because I don't know what I would have done without having kind of like the training wheels, or having like a safe environment to try. Because I did a commercial class in trimester 2, we did domestic, and I tried out all these different genres because I definitely didn't know what I wanted to do when I started. And I was also encouraged by my lecturers to take on opportunities outside of the classroom. So I assisted a domestic photographer, and so he was taking photos of kids and families, and I found I really didn't like that. So that was cool. I could, put that aside and say I tried that. And then move into commercial, which was more of a natural fit for me. And then by the end of it, I knew that was what I wanted to do. But I've still spent the last, 2 years since I graduated, still working out what that looks like for me in my career.
So you're not specialising particularly? You're sort of, or is there an area that you
I wouldn't
really
say I particularly specialise in one thing. I do video, I do product, I do portrait, lifestyle work, and I still assist for a lot of bigger, more established photographers, and so I still find it important to kind of dip my toes in different niches within the commercial industry, which for me is something that my lecturers really encouraged me to do.
It's actually a very important point, because working as a photographer, you need to get that practical experience.
Yeah.
So coming from an education background, getting your qualifications here, then it's pretty hard to jump straight into photography. So the assisting step is very important. 100%. So how did you go about getting assisting work?
Yeah, so in trimester 1 or trimester 2, my lecturers were asking me to look at photographers who inspired me, and so I looked at photographers in Sydney, and I kind of compiled a list of people, like, okay, when I finish my course, or in a couple of years, that's where I want to be. And so from there, I feel like it was a pretty bold move at the time, but I emailed them or I called them and said, hey, I'm a student and I'd like to assist you. A lot of them didn't write back because they don't have time, but a couple of them did. And so straight out of uni, I had a few assisting jobs, and through that, like, as you would know, the network or the industry in Sydney, it's like quite small, and so from that I've just found my number gets passed. If you do a good job and you turn up with a smile on your face and you're confident, and because assisting is just about having a can-do attitude, your number gets out, and from that I've kind of built this network, and I'm working as both an assistant and a photographer as well.
So the networking is crucial.
Oh, so important.
Yeah, so when it came to networking, how did you go about networking in the first place? Did you draw on your contacts here at the college? And
I don't know if I ever consciously am networking. It's more just like keeping up the relationships that you already have, and for me that was my takeaway from my time here, was the lecturers that I met who were already working in the industry. And so I think you even asked me, if you couldn't do a job or assist, or someone asked for an assistant, if you're turning up to class on time, if you've got a positive attitude, if you're even just like submitting your assignments with integrity and putting your full effort into it, people are going to notice and pass on your number. So that's kind of how I got started with that, was really utilising the network that I already had here, which is definitely what I was missing before I started. So I'd say kind of say yes to opportunities here, and it will stand you in good stead for when you leave.
It's a very good point, because how you approach your studies, how you approach coming to class, all of those sort of attributes 100%. We lecturers remember, and we do get a lot of inquiries from other photographers, and we want to recommend students.
The lecturers have connections and utilise them. I mean, I feel like I really did, and I kind of made it known to I really blatantly told my lecturers, give me the work. I'll do it. I'll say yes. And I think someone else touched on this before. I'll say yes, and then I'll ask them for help, if I need help figuring it out, if it was an actual shoot or assisting. And yeah, so I feel like I did utilise that network, and it's done me well.
You've got to be extremely proactive. You can't just wait for the work to come to you. You've got to go out and
100%.
look for those contacts. Is there an industry association that you sort of were drawn to or tried to affiliate yourself with?
We talked a lot about the AIPP, so that's how I kind of compiled my list to start with.
Which is the Australian Institute of Professional Photographers.
Yes, so that's kind of where I started. And then from there, there's a studio that I now assist at in Brookvale, Orchard Studio with Christian Mishenko. He's been around for a really long time, and so I kind of can feed into his network a little bit. And the people who do get in touch with me or that I reach out to, I have real confidence with that, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah.
So part of what you do at the college is to actually, at the end of your time, is have a portfolio. Mm-hmm. So how did you find that whole experience of producing a portfolio?
Yeah.
Are you continually refining it? How did it help you with looking for more work, etc.?
Yeah, 100%. It was a really great class, even though some of the other alumni have touched on it. Was quite confronting, I guess, to say put together this work and that's going to be what you go out to the industry with. What I found though was that it was a really good exercise for me to reflect on what I wanted to do. So I did a portrait folio. Would I show that now? No. But that's a really good kind of marker to say I need to update it, which I am doing, and I hope, I wish I could say I was continually doing it, but I don't. But it is a good, it was a good kind of benchmark for me, and to have industry come in and critique it, I guess I have a benchmark that I can start with, and I'm actually right now in the process of updating mine. And so I have somewhere to kind of go from already having that uni experience.
Mm-hmm. So the industry is also rapidly evolving. How do you adapt to, or what are some of the changes that you've seen even in the short period that you've been at the college or even prior to the college? Obviously the biggest transition was film to digital, and that was just cataclysmic. Yeah. But since then we've had a lot of other changes in the industry. So can you identify any changes, and how do you sort of keep an eye out on what's happening in the industry
100%.
And adapt?
Definitely video is so important. So at first I was like, I'm going to be a photographer, that's what I'm going to do. I named my domain name Millie Mead Photography, which I now regret because I just do video as well. And I find that it's been so important to integrate that into my business because there's demand for it. And if people are asking you, you have to say yes and have that skill set. And so we did a motion design class in trimester 3, and that was my first kind of foray into video. And since then I've really tried hard to keep upskilling, keep surrounding myself with videographers so I can continually learn and educate myself on video. And then, clients will ask for these things that I'm like, oh yeah, I can do, what did I do the other day? Like a cinematograph. I can do a cinematograph, and then I go Google it or something. There's, I guess it's more motion is tying into the video as well. And so it's just about saying yes and stretching yourself a little bit, not taking giant leaps and taking on something that you can't actually fulfill that brief excellently, but stretching yourself a little bit, which is what I do regularly to make sure that I'm staying kind of ahead of the game. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What were, just taking a step back, what were some of the highlights of your time at Billy Blue?
Definitely the exhibition at the end. It wasn't actually during, but at the end of my degree, we had an exhibition where my peers, we showed our folio. And so that was a really proud moment to kind of see how far we had come and, recognise that we're going out into the industry, but it's together. And so we are already our own network, was really incredible. During the course. And
since you've left, what are some of the highlights?
Oh, since I left? Well, definitely. I went to Tonga in 2019 with Canon and Australian underwater photographer Darren Dew, and that was the most amazing, probably, of my life and highlight of my career as well.
Very jealous.
Yeah,
It's on my bucket list.
It was amazing. So I spent 2 weeks in Tonga with Canon. We were in the water every day photographing humpback whales, which was amazing. And then off the back of that, I had an exhibition and I entered my photographs into a competition, the Australasia's Emerging Photographers competition, and that was the first time I'd entered a competition, and I did place highly commended in the animal category. So that was, that was a huge highlight for me since I finished.
Okay. What are some of the particular skills that you learned at Billy Blue that you've now been able to translate into your career now as a photographer?
There's so many skills, and I guess it comes back to treating every assessment like it was a job.
Yeah.
I was really enforced to read the brief and understand it and ask questions, put those dates into my calendar. So while I was studying, I got really into my calendar because four different classes, different deadlines, different assessments. That's exactly what my job looks like right now. I'm prepping for a shoot next week. I'm editing 4 projects from last week. I'm shooting tomorrow, so I've got to have my gear prepped. So those skills, taking on assessments like they're a job, time management, organisation, interacting with people, interpersonal connections. That was a real highlight for me.
Okay. So what are some of the worthwhile advice that you could give to students who are considering enrolling at the college and students that are currently at the college?
I would say probably what I needed to hear when before I started studying, and to some degree when I started studying, was utilise the people around you, because they want you to do your best. The lecturers here, the staff here, the other students, everybody wants you to do a great job, and they'll support you, and they do become your network. So I would say, say yes and make those connections.
Awesome. And what are some of the features that the college has to offer? For example, equipment studios that you found useful, that you were able to utilise. How did that sort of help you?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a studio downstairs in Sydney. And as well as that, we have like a cache of equipment here that I found that I could borrow. And once I kind of booked into the studio on a weekend, so I could book in on a Saturday and a Sunday. I was trying to be in that studio every weekend, whether it was just kind of playing around and taking a friend with me and experimenting with lighting. And then once I started to take on the jobs that my lecturers were saying, we'll put Millie forward for it. I could come and first of all borrow the equipment that's here and experiment with it, work out how I like to use it, and then I could also borrow that for jobs as well, which was just like invaluable. As soon as I finished studying, I was like, far out. There's not many places that you can just book in. You can book a studio in Sydney. I don't think, a space to just have all the lights there, have all the equipment there to just experiment. And then on top of that, it's also having lecturers here to show that work to and say, what do you think? How could I do it better next weekend? Yeah.
That's the crucial thing, because while you're at the college, you can actually experiment. When you experiment, you can afford to make mistakes and learn, and then
100%.
Sets you up then for the real world, because in the real world, you can't afford to make mistakes or too many mistakes.
100%. And also there's not that time, I guess. That's what I found. I don't have the time to be booking in on the weekends and using it as kind of a test run. But when I do, because I do try and make the time, to still experiment with my work, I must say that I would have confidence still sending that to my lecturers, who are now just my kind of network, and saying, what do you think of this? Do you mind just taking a bit of time to review my work 2 years on since I've graduated?
So in terms of personal passions and projects, do you have any particular sort of projects on the go besides your continual daily work that you're
I've found that to be really important for me because after COVID, I also found that it got so busy. There was so much demand for video and photo. So I was kind of flat out from July till maybe February. And so when I finished that, I was kind of feeling a bit like, oh, whoa. And so it's been really important for me to integrate more creative personal work into my week so that I can still feel like, replenished and ready to go. And for me, that's portraits. So I love photographing people and I love connecting with people through photography. And so that's what I try and make the time to book in portrait shoots with my friends or friends of friends. And that keeps my love alive. Yeah.
Okay. I think we've pretty much covered most of all the questions that I'm thinking of. I think that pretty much covers it. Were there any other questions that...
Yeah, let's open it up to the audience. Any questions? Maybe? No? Do you have any online questions? I guess similar to, the questions that we asked before, what was your first job out of uni? And how did you go interviewing, or do you interview in photography? I don't even know if that's the right term, but how did you go when you graduated?
Yeah, so I'm a freelancer, so I haven't interviewed for a job per se, but I guess the question would apply to how did I find clients? And so as I touched on before, I was trying to find those clients while I was studying. And initially that looked like going on Airtasker and finding quite like low entry jobs that I could be confident with, with the skills that I had acquired so far. And then from that really gave me the confidence to then just roll into working. And it's kind of hard to answer because all my business is repeat and referral. So I don't really market myself. I do a good job and then I get asked to do it, asked to come back. And then those people will pass my details on to the next client, and that's how it works for me. But the foundation of that was, was doing that during uni. Yeah.
So where do you see the industry is headed? What sort of changes do you need to incorporate into your future plans?
What I've been noticing is how quickly the turnaround needs to be. And I guess that as it's definitely changed from film. But the turnaround is so quick. And I've even noticed it in the last 12 months while I've been working full time. I do a lot of work for an agency that they do purely social media. And so of course that was so big during the last 12 months, COVID, because people, they want imagery and they want it now and it needs to be really fast, and so I need to shoot something and then turn it around so quickly. And so for me it's kind of about letting go of perfectionism and going with the flow of what the client needs and saying, I can deliver that and I'll do a great job and you can have it right now.
So you need to build up on additional skills like social media.
100%.
Personal marketing.
100%. I should do that. I don't do that, but I can do it for clients, and I can turn around images really quickly. I can turn around a stop motion video. It's kind of like you shoot it and then it's off. And that's what I've really noticed.
Okay, that's awesome. Okay, well I think we've covered pretty much all of the areas that need to be covered in terms of the photographic career, and also the time here at Billy Blue, which is a real important stepping stone. I believe that, because I actually did a little bit differently. I jumped into the industry as an assistant, and then I sort of was in a situation with the photographers I was working with where I thought, why am I doing this? I don't quite understand it. But it was only when I actually then started studying at that stage part-time, that all the pennies began to drop, and I began to understand why I was asked to do certain things. So the education side of it is extremely important, and that interaction that you have with lecturers counts for a lot, and is a really big step forward to help you into the industry, not only in terms of information but also in terms of networking, because all the photographers that work here at the college are all employed in the industry, and we have contacts, and we enjoy, and I love watching my students move ahead in the industry, and it's always great to see people like Millie, and there's quite a lot of students who are doing really well. So you've come across a few students as well?
Yeah, 100%. So as I mentioned, I contract at an agency, and there's 5 contractors, and we were all in the studio one day, and we all found out that we all went to Billy Blue, which is
wow,
kind of
that's
amazing.
Great.
Like all at different times.
We should have brought them tonight.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And I think that really kind of highlights what it means to go to Billy Blue and to go out into the industry and to have people, alumni, working in the jobs that you're going for. That was a cool moment.
We are very practically orientated, so we do encourage and help the students in terms of shooting and in terms of the studio equipment, and encourage them to use it.
Yeah, definitely.
So, thank you very much, Kayla.
Thank you so much, Millie. That was awesome. It was lovely to hear from you.
Thanks.
In between you guys. And thank you to everyone who watched at home. We did run a bit over time, but invaluable information, and any questions that any of you guys have here, please feel free to come up and ask, and keep sending questions through on Facebook. We'll make sure to get back to you. Thanks, guys.
You take all my wrongs and make them better. Yeah, you're making me wanna try forever. And I feel so free, oh my sweet baby. I was never the one to give up the ghost. No, I was so stuck. I kept on playing my part, wanted to give up cause nothing was changing. But with you it's so clear, and now that you're here I see colors in every spectrum. Guess I finally learned my lesson. Cause you glue all the pieces back together. Yeah, you take all my wrongs and make them better. Yeah, you're making me wanna try forever. And I feel so free, oh my sweet baby. Myself, and I'm thinking out loud, we won't need nothing else for the rest of our time. And I know it so well, I will always be by your side. Cause you glue all the pieces back together. Yeah, you take all my wrongs and make them better. Yeah, you're making me wanna try forever. And I feel so free, oh my sweet baby. Cause you glue all the pieces back together. Yeah, you take all my wrongs and make them better. Yeah, you're making me wanna try forever. And I feel so free, oh my sweet baby.
Said it was the last time, but you keep coming back to tell me sorry that you take back all the things you said just to hurt me. Our love just went cold.